on it as the chief executive for the United States of America. But I thought we'd talk to Brandon Arnold about it, who's executive vice president of the National Taxpayers Union. Brandon, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Lars.
Is it still a big, beautiful bill, or is it just the best we can get out of spineless Republicans on Capitol Hill? And I would call them that to their face.
Well, yeah, we can all agree it's big. Whether it's beautiful, I think that's in the eye of the beholder. I think it could be a lot prettier. And I think there's some basic, simple changes that Congress could make to this to improve the bill dramatically. I mean, Elon Musk is going bananas over this, and I think that's largely because of the debt impact. And Rand Paul and Ron Johnson and other members of the Senate are saying basically the same thing. And I agree. We shouldn't have a lot of red ink associated with this bill. We should be able to cut spending and cut taxes at the same time, walking and chewing bubble gum at the same time. It's not easy, I get that, but it is an absolute necessity, especially when we're running $2 trillion deficits, annual deficits. We're spending $2 trillion more each year than we bring in tax and other forms of revenue. That is unsustainable, and it needs to be fixed. And I sympathize with the members of Congress that are trying to fix that.
Well, and Brandon, the best comparison of numbers that I've heard so far this week, there's a friend of the show, Steve Moore, who's an economist, and he's very active. He has the Committee to Unleash Prosperity, and he's an advisor to Trump. And he says over the next 10 years, it forecasts that we would have spent $86 trillion over the next 10 years. And under this plan, if we stick with it, we'll spend 84, which is not quite a rounding error, but it's really close to a rounding error. You say, wow, you really cut your budget from 86 to 84 trillion over 10 years. That's insane. And he goes on to suggest that, well, you know, maybe I saw an interview with him. Maybe if you just told every federal department, cut 10%. And why is that so impossible for either the federal bureaucracy or the Congress to do? There are American families out there that have had, you know, mom or dad loses some source of income. Somebody goes from full-time to part-time. Somebody loses a job altogether. And they sit down and they make decisions to cut their budget. Now, they don't usually do a 10% across the board because that's a stupid way to do a family budget. Because in a family budget, you can't say, well, we're going to pay 90% of the mortgage and 90% of our car payment and 90% of the electric bill, because soon you'll find yourself homeless, carless, and sitting in the dark. But the federal government could do this. Couldn't they go to these various departments? I'd get rid of some of them altogether, like Department of Ed, but say to the department, you've got 90% of what you had last year. Figure out how to do the job with that. Now, all of those departments are big enough that you could do that, couldn't you?
Well, yes, but it ain't easy. And I think Elon Musk found that out. You know, we were looking at his cuts, I think, totaling a little less than $200 billion when originally he was talking about $2 trillion. I think there's still more work to be done, even though Elon's not going to be a major part of it. The Doge folks are still working and uncovering that waste. But anytime you're spending money, there's a recipient. People are getting that money, whether those are government contractors, government employees, or whether they're going out the door to the various taxpayers or special interest groups. And all of those entities fight tooth and nail to keep the gravy train running. That's what makes it so hard. If you need to trim your spending, maybe you cut Netflix, or maybe you trim the number of times you go out to the restaurant. And
you've seen my budget.
Netflix. The folks at Netflix probably don't call you back and yell at you for cutting, saying that you're going to be costing their children their college education. The folks at the local restaurant that you stop going to as frequently probably aren't bugging you and banging down your door and forcing you to try to come to that restaurant. But that's basically what happens in Washington. Whenever you try to cut any part of the budget, there are special interests, there are beneficiaries of those programs that make it very, very challenging. And people get weak-kneed on Capitol Hill very quickly, as you know all too well.
Okay, so how much good can President Trump do from the White House if and there's some talk that the White House is looking at this saying, go ahead, budget the money. That doesn't mean we have to spend it all. And I know they'll get into a fight over the Impoundments Act or the Impoundment Control Act, but I think Trump welcomes it. He says, great, take it to the courts, sue me, and see who wins. And I think he might be right that it's the Impoundment Control Act from the 70s is unconstitutional, because to say we have a weak chief executive already, the president has very few actual powers. Well, we all, say the president's very important. He can't spend a dime without Congress. He can't make a law without Congress. He can't make a judgment about somebody without the courts, but he has these authorities. If he takes that one to court and it hasn't been tested, will the Supreme Court say, you're right, it's not constitutional? Go ahead, impound all you want. And then he can make the choices, right?
Yeah, and I don't know how the courts would rule on that. But one thing I know for sure is if the president recommends spending cuts to the rescissions process, sends those to Congress, and they pass them, president signs it, then you don't have to worry about the courts. And that's what he did today. It's a bit of a trial balloon, but he sent a $9 billion spending cut package.
That's $9.6 billion.
Yes, exactly. And this is kind of a trial balloon here. If this succeeds, it's good, not great. $9 billion is a decent chunk of change, but not huge compared to our national debt and our fiscal picture. But if this fails, then we got some serious problems. If the Congress can't agree to cut $9 billion when we're running $2 trillion annual deficits, then that's when the bond markets are going to freak out, because there's really very little hope for the future here. So this is a trial balloon, step one in a lengthy process that's going to involve additional rescissions packages, hopefully 10, 20 times larger than this one. And then we can start to chip away. Then we don't have to worry about the Supreme Court. We don't have to worry about any kind of rogue federal judge overturning this, protracted legal fights. Let's do this the right way. Congress, the president working together to cut the federal budget.
I think that's a smart way to go about it. Brandon Arnold, thank you very much. He is the Executive Vice President at the National Taxpayers Union. And Brandon, we always appreciate your insights.